Lieutenant Mark Harris was enjoying a rare moment of peace in his quarters aboard the starship Argonaut. The mission had been a long one, mapping uncharted sectors of space, and the crew was due for some downtime. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime at his door. "Come in," he called out, expecting one of his crewmates. Instead, a slender figure slipped into the room. She was tall, with striking blue skin and large, expressive eyes that shimmered with fear and desperation. Her clothes were tattered, and she looked exhausted. "Please," she whispered in broken English, "I need help. Take me as your servant. I beg you." Mark blinked, trying to process what he was seeing. "Who are you? How did you get on this ship?" "My name is Lyra," she replied, trembling. "I escaped from the ravagers. They will kill me if they find me." Mark's mind raced. The ravagers were a notorious band of space pirates known for their brutality. "How did you get past our security?" "I have my ways," Lyra said, a hint of a smile breaking through her fear. "But I need your protection." Mark knew he couldn't turn her away. "All right, Lyra, you can stay, but you'll need to explain everything." Lyra sat on the edge of his bunk, and Mark handed her a blanket. As she wrapped it around herself, Mark opened a communication line to the bridge. "Captain, we have a situation here." The stern voice of Captain Elena Drayton crackled over the intercom. "What's going on, Lieutenant?" "We have an unexpected visitor, a refugee from the Ravagers," Mark said, glancing at Lyra. "Bring her to the bridge, now," Captain Drayton ordered. Mark nodded to Lyra, who stood up, still clutching the blanket around her. "Let's go. The captain will want to hear your story." They walked through the narrow corridors of the Argonaut, crew members casting curious glances at Lyra. The ship was a bustling hive of activity, even more so after news of the visitor spread. When they reached the bridge, Captain Drayton was waiting, arms crossed and a stern expression on her face. "Who are you, and why are you on my ship?" she demanded. Lyra swallowed hard, her fear evident. "My name is Lyra. I escaped from the Ravagers. I had no other choice." Captain Drayton's eyes softened slightly. "Tell me everything." Lyra sat in the captain's ready room, a cup of hot tea in her hands, and recounted her harrowing escape from the Ravagers. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the terror she had endured. "I was taken from my home planet years ago," she began. "The Ravagers attacked our settlement, captured those they didn't kill, and sold us into slavery. I've been on their ships ever since." Captain Drayton listened intently, her expression grave. "How did you manage to escape?" Lyra took a deep breath. "I've always been good with technology. I learned to navigate their systems, understand their routines. When we docked at a remote outpost, I saw my chance. I hacked into their security, created a diversion, and slipped away." Mark, who had been standing silently by the door, spoke up. "You said they would kill you if they found you. Why?" Lyra's hands trembled slightly as she set the cup down. "I stole something important. Information on their operations, their plans. If they get it back, they'll use it to cause even more destruction." Captain Drayton's eyes narrowed. "Where is this information now?" Lyra reached into a hidden pocket and pulled out a small data chip. "Here, it's encrypted, but it contains everything I've gathered." The captain took the chip and examined it. "This could be invaluable, but it also puts us at great risk. The Ravagers will stop at nothing to retrieve it." "We need to keep moving," Mark suggested. "If we stay in one place too long, they'll find us." Captain Drayton nodded. "Agreed. Set a course for the nearest Federation outpost. We'll hand this over to the authorities and get Lyra to safety." Lyra's relief was palpable. "Thank you. I can't thank you enough." "We're not out of danger yet," Captain Drayton warned. "But we'll do everything we can to protect you." As the Argonaut changed course, the crew prepared for the possibility of a Ravager attack. Lyra, despite her exhaustion, offered her assistance, helping to reinforce the ship's security systems. Mark found himself growing more impressed with her resilience and resourcefulness. "You've been through a lot," he said as they worked side by side. Lyra nodded, a determined look in her eyes. "I just want to make sure no one else has to suffer like I did." Mark's respect for Lyra deepened. "We'll make sure of that, together." The Argonaut continued its journey, but the tension on the ship was palpable. Everyone knew the Ravagers were likely to come after them, and the crew worked tirelessly to reinforce the ship's defenses and prepare for the worst. Lyra was instrumental in these efforts, using her knowledge of the Ravagers' tactics to help anticipate their moves. Despite the heightened alert, life aboard the Argonaut went on. Lyra quickly became a familiar face, her quiet determination earning the respect of the crew. She worked alongside Mark and others, contributing wherever she could. One day, as Mark and Lyra were repairing a damaged sensor array, the ship's alarm suddenly blared. Captain Drayton's voice came over the intercom, urgent and commanding. "All hands battle stations. We have a Ravager ship on our tail." Mark and Lyra exchanged a grim look. "It's them," Lyra said, fear creeping into her voice. "We're ready for this," Mark reassured her, grabbing her hand briefly before they both ran to their stations. The bridge was a hive of activity as the Argonaut prepared to engage the enemy. The viewscreen displayed the approaching Ravager ship, bristling with weapons and closing in fast. "Incoming fire!" one of the officers shouted. The ship shook violently as the first volley of laser fire hit. Captain Drayton barked orders, her calm demeanor helping to steady the crew. "Return fire! Evasive maneuvers!" Mark manned one of the gun turrets, his hands moving swiftly over the controls. "Come on, we can do this," he muttered to himself as he targeted the enemy ship. Lyra, stationed at a console nearby, worked to disrupt the Ravagers' targeting systems. "I've got them locked out of their primary targeting array," she reported. "Good work," Captain Drayton acknowledged. "Keep it up." The battle raged on, both ships exchanging heavy fire. The Argonaut took several hits, but the crew's coordinated efforts kept them in the fight. Lyra's knowledge proved invaluable, giving them an edge against their ruthless opponents. As the battle reached its peak, Lyra suggested a daring plan. "There's a narrow asteroid field nearby. If we can lure them in, we might be able to lose them." Captain Drayton considered the proposal for a moment before nodding. "Do it, helm. Set a course for the asteroid field." The Argonaut veered sharply, heading for the dense cluster of asteroids. The Ravager ship followed, relentless in its pursuit. The crew held their breath as they navigated the treacherous terrain, the ship weaving skillfully between the massive rocks. "Almost there," Mark said, his knuckles white as he gripped the controls. The Argonaut dodged and weaved through the asteroid field, the Ravager ship struggling to keep up. Finally, with a deft maneuver, they managed to shake their pursuers. "We did it," Mark said, breathing a sigh of relief as the Ravager ship disappeared from the viewscreen. "For now," Captain Drayton cautioned, "but they'll be back. We need to stay on high alert." With the immediate threat over, the crew of the Argonaut took the opportunity to regroup and make repairs. The ship had sustained some damage, but nothing they couldn't fix. Lyra continued to integrate herself into the crew, offering her expertise on various technical issues. Her presence became a comforting constant, and she quickly formed bonds with many of the crew members. One evening, Mark and Lyra found themselves alone in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The vast expanse of space was a calming sight, a stark contrast to the chaos of the recent battle. "Thank you for helping me," Lyra said softly, breaking the silence. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Mark smiled, his eyes reflecting the distant starlight. "You're part of the crew now. We take care of our own." Lyra's eyes shimmered with gratitude. "I've never known such kindness. The Ravagers, they were monsters." Mark reached out, taking her hand in his. "You're safe with us. We'll protect you." As they continued to talk, Mark learned more about Lyra's past. She had been taken from her home planet as a child, forced into slavery by the Ravagers. Despite everything, she had never given up hope of finding freedom. "We'll find a way to get you home," Mark promised. "No matter what it takes." Lyra looked at him, a mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. "I almost don't remember what home is like," she admitted, "but I want to find it. I want to see my family again, if they're still alive." Mark squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We will." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Lyra's strength and resilience inspired Mark, while his unwavering support gave her hope. They became an inseparable team, facing every challenge side by side. The days turned into weeks as the Argonaut continued its mission, each new discovery bringing them closer to understanding the vast universe around them. But no matter how far they traveled, Lyra's quest to find her home remained a constant focus. One day, as they were reviewing star charts, Captain Drayton joined them. "I've been thinking about your situation, Lyra," she said. "We have some contacts in the Federation who might be able to help us locate your home planet. It's a long shot, but it's worth a try." Lyra's eyes lit up with hope. "Thank you, Captain. That means more to me than you can imagine." Captain Drayton smiled. "We're a team. We'll figure this out for you." As the Argonaut set a new course, the crew felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead was uncertain, but with determination and unity, they knew they could overcome any obstacle. Lyra's hope for finding her home grew stronger, and with Mark by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Just as things seemed to be settling down, the Argonaut received a distress signal from a nearby colony. The message was garbled, but it was clear that they were under attack. Captain Drayton's voice echoed through the ship as she made an announcement. "All hands, prepare for emergency response. We've received a distress signal from the Calypso colony. They are under attack, likely from the ravagers. We are altering course to provide assistance." The crew sprang into action, readying weapons and medical supplies. Lyra's face went pale as the realization hit her. "They must have tracked us here," she whispered to Mark. Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle this. The Argonaut is a formidable ship, and our crew is ready for anything." As they approached the colony, the extent of the destruction became clear. Buildings were ablaze, and the sky was thick with smoke. Captain Drayton ordered the ship to red alert. "Deploy the emergency response team and provide covering fire. We need to secure the colony and repel the attackers." Mark and Lyra joined the response team, donning combat gear and preparing to deploy. The shuttle descended rapidly, landing amidst the chaos. Ravager troops were everywhere, looting and terrorizing the colonists. "Stay close," Mark instructed Lyra as they exited the shuttle. The team split up, engaging the Ravagers in fierce combat. Mark's pulse rifle barked out short bursts of fire, each shot finding its mark. Lyra moved with surprising agility, using her knowledge of Ravager tactics to outmaneuver their attackers. "We need to secure the central command post," Lyra shouted over the din of battle. "It's the heart of the colony's defenses." Mark nodded, signaling to the rest of the team. They pushed forward, cutting through the enemy lines with relentless determination. The command post was heavily guarded, but the Argonaut's crew was undeterred. "We're almost there," Mark said, ducking behind cover as laser fire whizzed past. Lyra pointed to a side entrance. "We can use that to flank them. It will give us the element of surprise." With coordinated precision, they executed the plan. The Ravagers guarding the command post were caught off guard, and within moments, the area was secured. Mark quickly accessed the colony's defense systems, rerouting power to the remaining turrets and activating automated drones. "This should help stabilize the situation," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Lyra looked around, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and determination. "We need to make sure the colonists are safe. Let's regroup with the others." As they moved through the colony, securing each sector, the tide of battle began to turn. The Argonaut provided crucial support from above, and the Ravagers, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat. Captain Drayton's voice crackled over the comms. "Excellent work, team. The colony is secure. Return to the ship for debriefing and medical attention." Back on the Argonaut, the mood was somber but hopeful. The crew had prevented further destruction, but the colony had suffered greatly. Lyra, Mark, and the rest of the response team were treated for minor injuries, and Captain Drayton called a meeting in the briefing room. "We need to address the root of this problem," Captain Drayton said, her tone resolute. "The Ravagers are becoming increasingly bold. It's clear they won't stop until they get what they want." Lyra stood up, her voice steady. "I know their main base. If we can hit them there, we can cripple their operations." The room fell silent as everyone processed her words. Finally, Captain Drayton nodded. "It's a dangerous mission, but it's our best chance. We'll need to plan this carefully." Mark glanced at Lyra, his expression filled with determination. "We're with you, Lyra. Let's end this once and for all." The crew of the Argonaut prepared meticulously for the mission to infiltrate and sabotage the Ravagers' main base. Every detail was considered, and every team member knew their role. The tension was palpable, but so was the sense of purpose. This was their chance to strike a decisive blow against their enemies. Lyra stood at the center of the planning room, her knowledge of the Ravagers' operations guiding the strategy. "The base is heavily fortified," she explained, pointing to a holographic map. "But there are weak points in their defenses. We'll need to split into two teams, one to disable their security systems, and another to plant explosives in critical areas." Captain Drayton nodded, her eyes scanning the faces of her crew. "We'll approach under the cover of darkness. Stealth is our best advantage. Let's make this count." Mark and Lyra were part of the infiltration team, tasked with disabling the security systems. As they boarded the shuttle, Mark felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. "You ready for this?" he asked Lyra. She nodded, her expression resolute. "We've come too far to turn back now." The shuttle descended silently towards the Ravagers' base, using advanced cloaking technology to avoid detection. They landed in a secluded area, and the team disembarked, moving swiftly and silently through the shadows. The base was a sprawling complex, bristling with weaponry and patrolled by heavily armed guards. Mark and Lyra led the way, using their knowledge of the layout to navigate the labyrinthine corridors. "Security control should be just ahead," Lyra whispered, her eyes scanning the surroundings. They reached the control room without incident, and Mark quickly set to work, hacking into the systems. "Give me a minute," he said, fingers flying over the keyboard. Lyra kept watch, her senses alert for any sign of trouble. "Hurry, we don't have much time." Finally, Mark bypassed the security protocols, shutting down the alarms and disabling the surveillance cameras. "We're in. Let's move." They rejoined the rest of the team, who had been waiting for the signal. With the security systems down, they advanced deeper into the base, planting explosives at strategic points. As they worked, the tension mounted. Every second counted, and the risk of discovery was ever present. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, but she remained focused, determined to see the mission through. Just as they were planting the final charges, a patrol stumbled upon them. "Intruders!" one of the guards shouted, raising his weapon. Mark and Lyra reacted instantly, engaging the guards in a fierce firefight. "We've been compromised," Mark said into his comms. "Detonate the charges and fall back." The team retreated, the base shaking with explosions as the charges detonated. The Ravagers, caught off guard by the sudden attack, scrambled to respond. "We need to get out of here," Lyra shouted, firing at the pursuing guards. The team raced back to the shuttle, narrowly avoiding the collapsing structures and incoming fire. They boarded the shuttle and took off, the Ravagers' base a burning wreck behind them. Back on the Argonaut, the mood was one of relief and triumph. The mission had been a success, and the Ravagers' operations had been dealt a significant blow. Captain Drayton addressed the crew, her voice filled with pride. "We did it. We've crippled the Ravagers' main base. This will give the Federation a crucial advantage in dealing with them." Lyra stood with Mark, their faces reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. "We couldn't have done it without you," Mark said, squeezing her hand. Lyra smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "We did it together. Thank you for believing in me." As the Argonauts set a course for their next mission, the crew felt a renewed sense of hope and purpose. They had faced incredible odds and emerged victorious, and with Lyra among them, they were ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. The destruction of the Ravagers' base was a major victory, but it came at a cost. The Argonaut had sustained significant damage, and several crew members were injured. As the ship limped away from the site of their triumph, the crew began the arduous task of repairs and tending to the wounded. The medbay was a flurry of activity. Mark, with a bandaged arm from a glancing shot during the retreat, was assisting the medical team. Lyra, though exhausted, was also helping where she could, her technical expertise proving useful even in medical emergencies. Dr. Samuels, the ship's chief medical officer, approached Mark. "We have a lot of injured, but we'll manage. How are you holding up?" Mark smiled wearily. "I'll be fine, just a scratch. How's the rest of the crew?" "Mostly minor injuries. A few more serious," Dr. Samuels replied, but we'll pull through. After ensuring the medbay was stable, Mark and Lyra made their way to the briefing room, where Captain Drayton had called a meeting. The atmosphere was somber, but hopeful. "Excellent work, everyone," Captain Drayton began. "We've dealt a significant blow to the ravagers. However, we need to remain vigilant. They're wounded, but not defeated." Lyra stood, her voice steady. "I know the ravagers. They'll regroup and try to retaliate. We need to stay one step ahead." Captain Drayton nodded. "Agreed. For now, our priority is to get the Argonaut back to full operational status and ensure the safety of the colonies in this sector. We've made progress, but the fight is far from over." The crew dispersed, each member returning to their duties with renewed determination. Mark and Lyra headed to the observation deck, a favorite spot for quiet reflection. As they gazed out at the stars, Lyra spoke softly. "I never imagined I'd be here, fighting alongside humans against the ravagers. You've given me hope, Mark." Mark smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "You've given us hope too, Lyra. Together, we can face anything." One day, as the ship cruised through the void, Captain Drayton called Lyra and Mark to the bridge. "We've received a message from Federation Command. They want to debrief us on the recent mission and discuss our next steps." Lyra nodded, her expression determined. "We'll need to present all the information we gathered from the Ravagers' base. It could be crucial for future operations." Mark agreed. "Let's get everything prepared." As they compiled their report, they reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Lyra's escape, the battle against the Ravagers, and their growing bond had all shaped their current path. The Argonaut docked at a Federation outpost, and the crew was given a hero's welcome. Admiral Tessa Bennett, a stern but fair leader, greeted them personally. "Welcome back, Argonaut," Admiral Bennett said. "You've done incredible work. The information you've gathered will be invaluable in our ongoing efforts against the Ravagers." Captain Drayton nodded. "It was a team effort. Lyra's knowledge and bravery were instrumental in our success." Admiral Bennett turned to Lyra, her expression softening. "You've been through a lot, Lyra. The Federation owes you a great debt." Lyra bowed her head modestly. "I only did what needed to be done. I'm just glad we could make a difference." After the debriefing, the crew was given some much-needed downtime. Mark and Lyra took the opportunity to explore the outpost, enjoying a rare moment of relaxation. As they walked through the bustling market area, Lyra looked around with wonder. "It's been so long since I've seen a place like this, so full of life and hope." Mark smiled, taking her hand. "You deserve this, Lyra. After everything you've been through, you deserve some peace and happiness." Lyra squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Mark, for everything." The Argonaut's new mission was underway, but Lyra's thoughts frequently returned to her home planet. With the Ravagers' threat diminished, the hope of finding her family and people grew stronger. During a quiet moment in the navigation room, she approached Mark with a determined look in her eyes. "Mark, I want to find my home planet," she said. "We've crippled the Ravagers, but I need to know if there's anything left of my home." Mark nodded, understanding her need for closure. "We'll find it, Lyra. Let's talk to Captain Drayton and see if we can adjust our course." Captain Drayton was sympathetic to Lyra's request. "We'll help you find your home, Lyra. We owe you that much. Let's gather all the data we have on possible locations and start our search." The crew scoured star charts and ancient records, piecing together clues about Lyra's home planet. After weeks of searching, they finally pinpointed a potential location, a small remote planet on the edge of known space. As the Argonaut approached, Lyra's excitement and anxiety grew. "This is it," she said, staring at the view screen as the planet came into view. "This is my home." The planet was beautiful, with lush forests and sparkling oceans, but it was also clear that it had suffered greatly during the Ravagers' attacks. The once thriving settlements were now ruins, overgrown with vegetation. As the Argonaut landed, Lyra's emotions were a mixture of joy and sorrow. She stepped off the ship, her feet touching the familiar soil for the first time in years. Mark followed closely, his presence a comforting anchor. They walked through the remains of Lyra's village, memories flooding back to her. "I never thought I'd see this place again," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're not alone anymore, Lyra. We'll rebuild this place, make it a home again. As they explored further, they encountered other survivors, hidden away in the depths of the forest. The news of the Ravagers' defeat had reached them, and they were cautiously emerging from hiding. One of the elders, a wise-looking woman with silver hair, approached Lyra. "We never thought we'd see you again, child," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Lyra embraced the elder, tears streaming down her face. "I'm home," she whispered. "I'm finally home." With the help of the Argonaut's crew, Lyra and the survivors began the process of rebuilding their home planet. They set up shelters, planted crops, and worked to restore the land. The Argonaut provided resources and assistance, its crew dedicated to helping in any way they could. Lyra quickly emerged as a leader among her people, her resilience and knowledge guiding them through the challenges of rebuilding. Mark stood by her side, offering support and encouragement. Their bond, forged in the heat of battle, had grown into something deeper. One evening, as they stood on a hill overlooking the village, Lyra turned to Mark with a smile. "I never thought I'd find this again," she said. "A place to call home, and someone to share it with." Mark smiled, taking her hand. "You've come a long way, Lyra, and you've given all of us hope and strength. I'm honored to be part of this journey with you." As they continued to rebuild, more survivors arrived, drawn by the news of the planet's revival. The community grew, and with it, a sense of hope and renewal. Lyra's leadership and the support of the Argonaut's crew created a beacon of light in a galaxy still recovering from the Ravagers' tyranny. One day, as the sun set over the horizon, Lyra and Mark stood together, watching the sky. "We've come so far," Lyra said, her voice filled with wonder. "And there's still so much to do." Mark nodded, his eyes reflecting the same determination. "We'll face it together. Whatever comes next, we'll handle it."